an excellent segue. You've really built these characters into obviously over time they've become more multidimensional. But as I said last time, it seems like they were never really flat one-dimensional cartoon characters, as counterintuitive as that might be. They sort of just from episode 1, they seemed to spring off the page. They had their skills, they had their faults. None of these were generic template human, as it were. So how did you do that? Because that's quite the feat from my perspective. And oftentimes I'm creating, I'll literally like put a mental stamp that says generic human, and then I'll kind of let the story develop them. How'd you drop them full formed, as it were?
Oh, they were definitely not full formed when they came out. But I did have the advantage of starting and working on the story for that full year before the comic actually debuted, and it was during that process that it was a discovery process, like you described. It was like, well, I'm going to put these characters in these situations and let's see what happens. And the ones that may have had a template to draw from, like Nick and Key, and to some degree Fugger, I could kind of foresee what their reactions were going to be, and it was just, okay, how can I spin this to be funny? Whereas some of it was just trying to imagine in my head, how were they going to react to this? How are they going to adapt to this situation? And while I'd love to say they sprang fully formed out, it was a discovery process. It was an evolutionary process. And I really firmly believe that, like you said, they need to have faults. They need to have strengths, but they also need to have faults, and they need to be either aware of those faults. They can be aware of those faults and then grow as a character. They learn to adapt to those faults and learn from them, or they can continue down that one-dimensional route of always being the one. Charlie Brown always would try to kick the football when Lucy would try to put it down for him, no matter how much he knew that that she was going to pull it away. So having the characters grow and change, I think, is a very important part of making them fleshed out. Because if they don't grow and change, then growth and change, of course, is essential to any real human being, and that even a fictional one, that's important, is that growth.
Okay, so was there at any point where you decided you were going to make this a living story where change happens with time and the timeline just differs with the necessary limitations of the storytelling, and not just a static? Because there are many of the classic comics you mentioned have a static storyline. All the characters, Peanuts, Heathcliff, Garfield, they're all trapped in a moment in time, as it were. So did you make a conscious choice to take the living story path, or was that something that just happened?
I don't know that there was a conscious choice, but I did like the idea of some sort of continuity, and maybe this was bucking the trend a little bit of the newspaper comics that GPF was sort of templated from, because you can pick up a newspaper and read Garfield one day, and then you can pick it up a month later and read it again, and you will have missed nothing technically, because nothing's happened, just like you said, just kind of static. And I never liked that. I always found it much more fascinating to read, while I would enjoy the jokes of a gag-a-day strip. I always found it more fascinating to read the ones that had some sort of continuity to them, like the Prince Valiants and the Phantom or Spider-Man or Batman. They were in the newspaper, and so I did want there to be continuity. Making it quote unquote real time as it was for maybe the first 7 or so years, just kind of was an evolution of that, I think. But beyond that, when it started getting into past that point, there was more story that I wanted to cram in than I had time to do it. And so I kind of let that time span fluctuate a little bit, so that all of year 8 of the comic, which actually took maybe 2.5 years to tell, occurs in the course of in comic about a week. So at that point, it kind of became fluctuating. Time passes, but you're not as certain exactly how much time has passed.
Okay, so you've got this giant cast of characters now. You've taken it down the route of change and growth. How do you keep that all straight?
I don't know my own phone number. I do cheat a little bit. I do keep a number of office-style documents to kind of keep track of things. There is there's a master script document for every individual year, because I treat each calendar year like a season of a television series, or a compilation book is kind of the way it was getting compiled at the time. So each year has a document, and in that document we'll have the individual scripts for, all the way down to individual dialogue per panel. But there will also be, at the bottom of that, I've got a rolling list of notes that I keep track of. And whenever I come up with an idea, I throw it into that pool, and then I will update that pool sometimes, like, oh, okay, I've already addressed this in this other story, now I have to move it to the next step. There's also a continuity spreadsheet. It had to be geeky if there was going to be spreadsheets involved, where I do map the actual numeric sequence of numeric strips to dates, and then those dates to stories. And with that, I've actually done that to move things around to where, oh, I need more time to move this, I'll move this story down, or I want the year to end on a specific note, or I want to hit a specific strip on a specific day. Then I can pad things and move them around to be able to do that. On rare occasions, especially the big stories that take over a year to tell, some of those I will break out into a separate document that is just devoted to that. And it may take me a year or 2 or 3 to flesh that document out, to get all the notes together and put everything together before I actually start writing actual scripts and dialogue. And I have also, on a couple of occasions, gone on to use mind mapping software that will let you, you start with your central premise, and then you block out, you branch off of that to different ideas, and then from there you branch out until you've got this big, huge spider web or tree of different ideas, but then it all connects back to the central premise.
Thank you. That's good information. So, as you've been crafting these characters over the years, have you ever had any character that felt like it was getting away from you? Like you'd somehow lost control of
them? That's a good question, because they definitely tend to have a mind of their own, and they will definitely, there have been many times that I've written stories, and then as I'm writing it, I realized, no, this character would not do this. They would do this other thing. And next thing I know, I'm going in a totally different direction than what I expected. And usually that's for the best, because at that point, like you were going back to what you were saying about fully formed characters, when the character drives the story, then sometimes it's best for the author to just say, right, okay, I'm going to follow you and see where you go. And it usually ends up being a better story, in my opinion, because I always like to focus on the characters. But the closest I would say of getting away from me might be Trudy, because while I had planned for some of the things that did happen to her, I did always plan for her to have an ultimate goal that she was working toward, and that there would be some sort of redemption arc that would kind of follow along with that, where um, she would see the error of her ways and kind of turn around. I didn't always see it the way it kind of turned out. And even now, with some of the things that I have planned for her coming up, it still kind of surprises me that this is the way she wants to go. Okay, I can see this. I'm going to follow along and see if this is the right way to go. So.
Okay, so kind of a mirror of that. Do you ever create characters where you come to the point in the story and you realize you need a character? There's a slot that needs to be filled, and so you have to build a character specifically to fill that need.
Yeah, lots of times.
An example would be?
Well, probably the best example I can think of off the top of my head would be the character of Trish, who ends up being a very complex character in and of herself,
Technically,
because
she's two characters, but
technically she's two characters from what we've seen in the comic. She was the one who basically introduced the idea of the alternate universe that since has come to be known as the Negaverse, because we end up meeting the quote-unquote bad Trish, as the fans called her, for a long time, before we met the quote-unquote good Trish, or real Trish. And I needed a character to kind of introduce those concepts, and she's the one who just kind of popped in and evolved from that into that role. And I remember somewhere I've still got the initial sketches where I was saying, I need to come up with this character. What does she look like? How do I come up with her? And ended up spending an evening, trying to come up with what she looked like, how she talked, what her mannerisms would be, and how she fit into this greater whole of the story I was hoping to tell.
Okay. So now going back to a point I brought up last time, I just noted that you're awfully free with the images and names of certain popular celebrities. So, namely, oh man, just brain fart. What's his name? The handsome guy on the
island. Sean Connery.
Yes. And my question then was, do you have excellent lawyers or just a lot of chutzpah?
I try to rely on the fact that only a handful of people on Earth know who I am or read my little comic strip, and hopefully no one will ever tell anyone about it. Although I do have a very funny story where that kind of backfired on me once.
Really?
Yes, I was in the middle of the very first of the Harry Potter parodies, where I was, introducing, the geeky Harry Barker stories, and I made an offhand joke about there's a story part in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone where they need to get the information from Hagrid about where the Sorcerer's or Philosopher's Stone is held. And, it just so happened that Hagrid volunteered that information unintentionally. But Dexter got cast into the role of Hagrid, and I needed some way for them to get the information out of him. So I had them mention that we found like Harlan Ellison's original script for the original Star Trek episode The City on the Edge of Forever. And of course, Dexter, being a big huge Star Trek nerd, said, "Gimme, grab it." And next thing I know, about a week or so after that comic went quote unquote live, I got an email from someone saying, "Hey, I'm a friend of Harlan Ellison, and he really doesn't use the internet, but someone did show him your comic, and he wants to talk to you." And next thing I know, in a week or two later, I'm having a multi-hour long phone call with none other than Harlan Ellison, and where he's apparently saw this and enjoyed it and thought it was funny, and said, "I don't understand any of this computer stuff, but I hear you write funny stuff about computers." So,
Well, high praise. Okay, so in your story, of course, some people say the story is only as good as the villains, and so you've written some very complex and interesting villains and situations that don't require a villain. And you told me quite a bit last time about Fooker's father in the. I'm not even going to try to pronounce them. Tell us about Fooker's father.
Well, he was a very difficult character to build, to create, and I knew that, especially for the role that I wanted him to play in the third of the really big, huge story arcs, Scylla and Charybdis. I wanted him to be the main villain, but I also wanted him to be a character who believed he was doing the right thing, even though everyone else is thinking this is crazy. This is you're selling out the human race, but he thinks of himself as the human race's savior because he has this all mapped out and planned out how he's going to save the Earth. But I knew that it was going to be a very difficult job to navigate that, to make him believable in that he believed himself, but at the same time being the obvious villain, being the one who's the architect of the scheme. And so, I had always planned for Fooker's father to be kind of a very strict disciplinarian, hardcore military man, and Fooker, being a bit of a wild element, would naturally rebel against that, and so there would be a great deal of tension between the two of them. And so I kind of tried to put myself into both roles and thinking about how the two characters would think and how they would interact with each other. And sometimes I go so far as to, try and play out scenarios in my head when I'm trying to write dialogue or something between characters like that. I try to cast myself into both roles and think, how would this person react? Well, based on that, how would the other one react? And, I wish I could say I had a magic formula that, if I plug all these variables in, pull the lever, and out comes an awesome character. But sometimes it's just a bit of experimentation, a bit of, this didn't work, so let me revamp it and try it another way, and just trying to put myself into the mindset of the character and how that they would think.
Interesting. Okay, so please you say it, because I can do the one pretty good. That the metaphor you used for the big story arc, that Barker Sr. was a part of. What was that called?
Scylla and Charybdis.
Okay, which is from the Odyssey, I believe. What were some of your more traditional inspirations? Did you ever read any of the old classics?
Yeah, I did, and I that's kind of one thing that I've always tried to do with those bigger stories is try to pull some sort of illusion. Um, yeah, I try to think back to like Nicholas Meyer was writer and director on Star Trek II and Star Trek VI, and in both of those he had a lot of allusions back to classic literature, whether it was Nathaniel Hornblower or Shakespeare or something, or Moby Dick. And so I kind of personally have tried to model that a little bit. I don't know how well I can say I've done it, but especially with the later two of the big stories, To Thine Own Self, which of course is an allusion to Hamlet, my favorite Shakespearean play, and then Scylla and Charybdis, which of course, like you said, is an allusion back to Homer. Um, I kept thinking, well, the whole point of this story is the Earth is being caught between two potential alien invasions happening at once, and trying to come up with a way to encapsulate that into a title that just tells you everything. And at one point, the tentative title was A Rock and a Hard Place. And I kind of, wait a minute, that actually comes back, that's an allusion back to the two monsters, Scylla. Scylla was the Hydra on the rock, I believe, and Charybdis was the whirlpool. And so the ship had to pass between the two to be able to survive. And so it just kind of naturally evolved from that, and that's how that title came about. And I do like to make those allusions when I can, because if even if I, it's not true, I like to make people think that I'm educated and smart.
Okay, so you have a favorite Shakespearean play. So why Hamlet?
It hit at the right time, I think. It was I high school English class. Every year there was at least one Shakespearean play. We did Caesar, we did Romeo and Juliet. But when it came to Hamlet, it just kind of clicked with me more than any of the other ones. And I just somehow just kind of dove into it and really enjoyed it.
So can you tell me one thing that you really brought out of that play? What was a theme or a scene or something that really just stuck with you? Or was it the experience?
I'd say it's a good bit of the experience, but then again, I like to think of myself as a writer who emphasizes character, and I really liked the characters in that story. They are all very flawed in many different ways, and they again, that kind of made them feel more real to me than Romeo and Juliet. I didn't care too much about it because, oh yeah, they're young, they're in love, and they're gonna do something stupid like killing themselves. Oops, I think I spoiled something there. I don't know. But Hamlet is much more nuanced and the characters are much more flawed, because there's all these surreptitious machinations, to use my own titles, between Polonius and Hamlet, and everyone has their own agenda that they're trying to pull. And here's Hamlet, who's actually kind of a anti-hero because he's trying to find a way to expose and potentially kill the king. He's navigating through this, and you're not sure whether he's feigning madness or if he is actually going mad at the same time. And it's just so sophisticated in my head, and I just find it such an interesting story.
Okay. Do you have any other classical favorites?
I do enjoy The Lord of the Rings. I enjoyed about half of Moby Dick. Um, the other half being all the very nuanced explanations of different types of whales and different whaling things that just kind of put me to sleep. So
I
reading
found
the
the best way to enjoy Moby Dick is to be stationed in the bush, Alaska for 2 months without a way out. So.
Quite possibly correct.
So let's talk about the characters in Moby Dick. Not a direct correlation, but one of the main character themes in Moby Dick is obsession.
Oh yes.
And that sort of hyper focus that the characters get. Did you draw on any of that for your characters? Because I can definitely see that, but that is like I said, maybe a universal human theme. Were you deliberately drawing from that obsession and the laser focus that warps reality around you?
No, but not off the top of my head, but I can say that not just in a human focus, but that is something common among geeks in particular. Not just computer geeks, but anyone who calls themselves a geek, and they have that focus on one thing that they greatly enjoy. And it's also something that I can relate to on, my son has ADHD, and so sometimes he has that laser focus, and he'll play a video game or he'll do something else, and that's all he will focus on. And you kind of have to say, son, you got to eat now, or you're gonna die. And I can see some of that in myself. I know he gets some of that from me. He gets some of it from his mom. And we've both kind of, looked at that and said, yeah, maybe we should have taken these tests when we were younger, and we'd probably be on this scale somewhere. So I think it's something that's very common to all geeks of all walks of life, of having that focus and obsession.
And one of my supervisors keeps a special eyeball on me to make sure I, drink and don't, just collapse in the middle of the forest somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's been wonderful talking again. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and do this again.
Oh, no problem.
Still recording. So just to kind of wrap it up here,
mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself going with this company? Because is this something you're going to continue for a while? Do you see a concrete wall coming up at some point? Or?
Maybe not a concrete wall, but I will just tentatively say I see an end in sight. I do think the GPF will come to an end, and I think it will come to an end not too far in the distant future. But it will not be a concrete wall where there will be nowhere to go beyond that. I have plenty of stories that I could continue to tell in the GPF universe, but I think I'd rather tell other stories. I'm starting to get to the point where I'd rather move on to something else.
Kind of looping back to one more thing we talked about last time, does this have anything to do with those 3 novels you said you were working on?
A little bit, yes. Like you said, I've done NaNoWriMo. I won 1 year and went on to finish that book, write a second one, and start a third in that series. They still need some polish, and I still need to find a way to publish them somewhere, but that's forthcoming. But I have other ideas, that some of which are brand new that have come out in the last year, and some of them are literally things that I've started working on in college and have had percolating back here for 2 decades or more that need to eventually be exercised. And so I'm hoping I'm
I find
hoping
it amusing because I tell people I write to trap the voices in my head on paper. So
yes, that I can understand that. And they definitely say, hey, I've got a story. Tell me, can I come out to play now? So I
yeah.
definitely want to get those other ideas out, but I just don't know that I can do that with GPF at the same time. So
Okay. Well, again, thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed these conversations, both of them. And so, where can people contact you? And where can people find your work?
well, GPF can be found at GPF comics, comics.com. Of course, you could leave out the hyphen if you want. That'll also work. I've got that domain name too. But from there, there is a contact page that has all the different ways people can contact me, whether it's the forum or email or Twitter or Facebook, what have you. But that's kind of the hub. From there, you can find other things like my blog and social media and such.
Okay. Well, it was great seeing you. I'm going to take the time to give my book a plug. I'm writing Humans Are Weird. I have the data about an alien scientist who writes essays on humans because they're very strange, you know. Okay. You have a great day, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime, but hopefully not as soon as we did this time.
No problem.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.